everybody. This is Melinda Emerson, the Small Biz Lady, America's #1 small business expert. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of the Small Biz Chat podcast. We have an amazing show in store for you today. If you're trying to figure out how to get more leads, I've got an expert here that's going to help you out. And if you're running a service business, a solo business, and you want to figure out how to scale your business, I got an expert here that's going to give you her secrets on how she did it. And if you're looking to buy or sell a business, I have an expert here who's going to talk about both sides of the equation and what you need to know so that you're prepared and don't lose your shirt. Now, if you're looking for how to grow your business with referrals, there's a skill, a secret to that. So we're going to talk about that. If you are looking to get into business the fastest way possible, we're going to talk about how to do just that. And you want to be able to tap into a strategy to grow your business. And it's very hard for service businesses. I know, I've been running one for 23 years. So you want to make sure you're thinking through all of your technology options and staffing options. And I have some amazing experts here today that are going to get into all of it. The goal of all of this is to help you with your long-term business strategy. Now, here on the Small Biz Chat podcast, we talk about how to start and grow a successful business. Our mission is to end small business failure, and we bring in guests with amazing expertise to give you advice from multiple angles to help you take your business to the next level. Now, the Small Biz Chat podcast is a peer-to-peer mentoring show. We're really about giving small business owners invaluable business advice that they otherwise would have to pay for. The Small Biz Chat podcast can be seen on my Small Biz Lady YouTube channel and on my Facebook page. So please do me a favor and subscribe to both and share it. More people need to know about how to get great information to grow their business. Today's guests are author and sales contrarian, Joanne Black, buy-sell broker, David Barnett, and founder of Flavor Atlanta, Chef Eboni Bowman. So I am so excited for all of them to be here. And now it's time for me to introduce my first guest. Joanne Black is America's leading authority on referral selling. She's not bragging. Her publisher gave her that moniker, and she's taking it. Referrals work whether you're looking for a job, wanting a promotion, need clients, or looking for a date. She's written 2 books, No More Cold Calling, the breakthrough system that will leave your competition in the dust, and Pick Up the Damn Phone, how people, not technology, seal the deal. Joanne founded her company in 1996. She works with business owners to drive revenue to propel growth through referrals. Please join me in welcoming from San Francisco, author, speaker, and sales contrarian, Joanne Black. Welcome, Joanne.
Oh, that's a great welcome, Melinda. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I have known you for so long, and I'm so glad that I finally got you on my podcast. So tell me, how did you get started in business, and how did you discover referral selling?
Well, first of all, I never thought I'd be in sales because I was the shyest kid you would ever want to know, and a young adult as well. And I'm still an introvert. You know, people think of sales as the used car salesman, and I'm not that, and good salespeople aren't, which you and I think everybody knows now. But it started, I worked for 2 different consulting and training firms. And in 1996, the economy was great. And my colleague said, Joanne, start your own business. And it turned out my first client was an outplacement firm, a small outplacement firm, and I was working with them on their sales strategy. Referrals haven't even come into my head yet. Well, at the same time I was with them, they were doing a customer satisfaction survey of 50 of their best clients. And I added this question on the last round: would you be willing to be a referral to this client? Well, 7-point scale came back 6.5. So the next meeting with the management team, I said, look, 50 of your best clients saying they refer you. Are you asking? Well, you can guess the answer. It was no in 1996, and it's still no now. That's how it started.
Wow. So why are referrals the number one way to drive revenue?
Everybody loves referrals, we know, because we get an introduction, right? So when you're introduced to someone you want to meet, you get the meeting. It's not X number of dials. I don't need to send 12 cold emails, any of that. So it's a huge savings in prospecting time, because none of us like to prospect. I don't care who you are. It's not our favorite thing. But with referrals, it is. And here's what happens, that we gain trust when we're introduced to someone that our referral source knows very well. The trust our prospect has for that person transfers to us. So just picture that, ear to ear, we have trust. And the hardest thing for salespeople or anybody in business to earn. We all know that, because we have that used car salesman thing in our heads. And so that's one of the reasons referrals are so great. It saves time, increases productivity. We get the meeting with the right person, and then they can refer us to other people, either within their company or to their counterparts in other companies. Now, here's a huge statistic. When you look at people you've been introduced to in the past, and they are a prospect, think about the percent of time that person actually became a client. That's the conversion rate. Well, years ago,
I actually know, isn't the conversion rate 60% on warm referrals? Isn't it 60%?
It's more. It's more. So here, I do polls all the time. So it always used to be 50%. And then about 5 years ago, when I asked that question, now it was 60, to your point, 70. Some people even said 90, and some people said 100. So
Wow.
it's huge. And that's really how it drives revenue, right? We have a qualified prospect who's become a client, we convert them, and we drive revenue. Referrals drive revenue.
All day, all day. But now, with the internet selling and all this automation and all this stuff, why do you feel like referral selling is even more important today?
It's great in any economy, but in a down economy, it's even better. And we've had many of those in the last 30 years, many, more than we'd like to think about. And here's why. When you're introduced to someone that your prospect knows and trusts, you will always get the meeting. And especially in times that are down, a recession or otherwise, they're always going to talk to that person. Everybody else, they're going to refuse, because they're very busy working on their own strategies in their own company.
Now, you have very specific definition for referrals. What is it?
An introduction. Period. It used to be, oh, I'll give you a name. Email or call Melinda and tell her I told you to reach out to her. Does that work? Sometimes. But here's the power of the introduction. And this is happening to me tomorrow. I was just introduced to someone. You have the opportunity to get all this intel about your prospect, because on LinkedIn, anywhere on the web, we only put there what we want people to see. So I always ask about, well, tell me about this person. How do you know her? What's she like? What's important? Why do you think she'd be interested in speaking with me? What's going on in her business? That's the power of an introduction. And that's why you never, ever, ever, ever ask for an introduction on social media or through email, because you miss that opportunity to get that intel. It's the biggest differentiation ever, because when we get the introduction, we get the meeting, and then we're in. And now it's our opportunity to build relationships, get in first. All of that matters, depending on the size of the company. Sometimes they'll issue a request for proposal. And I'm telling you, if you haven't been involved in creating that, don't bother because you won't win. Somebody else is in there, right?
Right. No matter who you're selling to, people still do business with people that they like, know, and trust. Period. It doesn't matter if your number's lower. If nobody knows you, nobody cares, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Now, I know that you're all about getting on the phone, getting that intel. But is there any technology you can use to garner referrals? I mean, you talked earlier about an example of someone adding one question to a survey. I mean, like, is technology persona non grata when it comes to getting referrals?
Oh, let me see how I'm going to answer that, Melinda. Technology is great for research. We have AI, all of this technology now that if we're researching a prospect, we can find out lots about them. If they're a public company, oh my gosh, it's all out there. But that's how we do our research, that intel, period. But for the introduction, we are the only app.
All right, I'm gonna take that as gospel because you said it. All right, now there's no secret that that there's a crowded marketplace. People are using technology. There's globalization, competitions everywhere. So how do you ensure that a buyer chooses you? Like, even after the introduction, like, how do you close them?
Well, insure, you can't insure. I don't know. I do know what we all need to do is ask great questions. No pushing, no pitching, no talking about ourselves, because here's the thing. Nobody cares about us. They only care about what we do for them. Our conversations need to be conversations. And here's the thing. If we are not the right person, we need to say no and then refer them to someone who can help. But the trust is there. We can't break it. We can't break it by being a pushy salesperson.
Right.
We earn it by building that relationship, asking good questions and probing, because I think most of us know the first problem people come to us with is not typically the real problem.
Right. Once you get in there, you find out what the real story is, right? What they weren't willing to tell you what the real problem is until you get inside and you can kind of see for yourself. But let's talk about LinkedIn for a second, though, because I am connected to, oh my gosh, over 17,000 people on LinkedIn. And all the time I get requests from people, will you introduce me to so-and-so? And 9 times out of 10, it's from somebody else I don't know. So it's like somebody I don't know is asking me to introduce them to the CEO of Pitney Bowes or something. And I'm going, I'm not doing that. I don't know you from Adam's Alley Cat. I'm not doing that, right? But I do see a lot of, every now and again, an actual friend of mine emails me on LinkedIn and says, hey, do you know so-and-so? And I respond, yes, I know them really well. What do you need me to do? Do you need me to call them? Do you need an email introduction? Do you need like, what's going on? And then they will call me and say, hey, I'm interviewing for this job, or can you? Absolutely. If it's somebody I actually know. But I think that social media has somehow made people feel like we're cool, and we're, even if we're not, like a connection, sometimes people confer that as a relationship. And I see people using platforms like LinkedIn incredibly inappropriately. I mean, we're not even going to talk about the people that pitch you 5 seconds after they connect to you, because that's a whole other thing. But just the audacity of people to ask you for a referral and you don't know them. I don't know why. Have you seen a lot of that? Have you heard people talking about that?
Yes, I have. And in fact, several years ago, LinkedIn had a button that you could click and then you asking someone for a referral. Well, that drove me up a tree, but they took that off and it's still happening. But no, and here's why. You would never do that, because if I'm giving you a referral, Melinda, my reputation is on the line. So I'm telling someone, you need to meet Melinda because, and I give a solid business reason. And here's the nuance. I'm going to refer you, Melinda, because you're a nice person and you're sharp. Forget the fact I've known you for at least 10 years, but beside that, but your prospect is not going to take a meeting because you're a nice person.
Right.
They're going to take the meeting because there's a valid business reason.
Right. And I think sometimes people, even people that'll email you to pitch. I got an email earlier today from someone who wanted me to just help them promote their app that they have that helps people, schedule appointments and stuff. And I emailed the guy and I was like, tell me why I should help you. Like I don't know you. People actually pay me to promote products, but just for kicks and giggles, tell me why I should help you, because that's what was missing from the email that you pitched me. You told me who you were, you told me what you do, but you didn't tell me why I should help you. And it's like, it's crazy. I just see bad behavior in this area a lot. And I just was curious if you've seen it. Now, let me ask you something else. Should you give a friend, like if you're asking someone for a referral, should you give them an out? Should you give them permission to say no? Or should you know better than if somebody could say no, they're not the person you should be asking?
Here's what happens. So I've had my company 26 years. No one has ever said no. And if you're asking and they're not the right person, they'll refer you to the right person because you have a relationship. You only ask people where you have a strong relationship. It's not who you think would be the best connected. You always go with a relationship because that's how you get your intel. That's how you learn, always. And if you're not the right person, you will tell them. But if I refer you and you don't follow up and you pitch and all of that, it reflects on me. So I'm never going to do that unless I have a relationship.
I love it. I love it. Listen, when we come back, we're going to talk more with Joanne Black about how to get referrals to grow your small business. You're watching the SmallBizChat podcast, and we will be right back. Are you ready to become a boss? Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady. Click the button below and take my free boss quiz. This assessment will help you learn your entrepreneur type and find the right business model for you. Get this information about the #1 asset in your business. Yeah, that's you. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host. And we've been talking about how to get more leads in your business. And the answer is ask for more referrals. And we're here with Joanne Black, who is breaking it down about how to do this. So Joanne, I want to switch gears with you a little bit. Should you offer incentives for referrals? Like to customers, if you don't have a B2B business where you get to know your customers personally, let's say you got a B2C business, should you offer incentives for referrals?
It's pretty typical in B2C, but in B2B, I say no. It feels like a bribe, actually. Now, sending a personal gift or a donation after the fact, absolutely. Incenting salespeople, you have salespeople or people in your company, absolutely, because this costs you nothing, right? A referral costs you nothing except one thing: the price of a stamp, because you're going to put that on your handwritten thank you note and actually mail it.
Love it. Love it. So can you get referrals without asking, Joanne?
It happens. I call those inbound referrals. And they would happen, a client says, oh, we need you to come in and do some more. Or they'll tell other people to contact us. Or something comes in on the website. That's inbound. We have no control over that. We need to be outbound, which is proactively asking for referrals, because growing our business is not about sitting back and waiting.
Exactly.
Right? No matter the size. I'm a small business owner.
Absolutely.
I've been that twice. and I'm
And
sticking to it.
what would you say is the biggest missed opportunity in asking for referrals?
It's asking our customers. Again, just like that first meeting, no one was asking. And it's happening now. And I talk to a lot of people, and I do polls on podcasts, on webinars when I'm working with a client. Who has asked every single one of their clients with whom they have a relationship for a referral? Not happening. That is the biggest gap today. It always has been. But, clients are thrilled to help us. They just don't know what to do.
All
And the
right,
other
so
thing is,
you're reprogramming my head. I'm now going to start preaching this. I always preach keep your customers, customer retention. So now I'm going to start preaching and ask them for a referral. Turn your customers into an unpaid sales force. Ask for a referral, please. So that's going to be my new mantra for 2023, I think. Listen, last question. Tell me, what is the best business advice you've ever been given?
it was my first job out of college. I worked for a women's retail store here in San Francisco that had about, maybe 15 or 20 stores. And I was on the first floor. And that's the same today. It's cosmetics, it's hosiery, it's gifts, it's all those things. And I wanted to redo a display. So here I am, a trainee, I want to redo a display. And I asked these people in my area, what do you think? And they said to me, it's never been done before. Ask Carolyn. That was the manager. I went to Carolyn and I told her, and I said, they told me it's never been done before. Without missing a beat, she said, that's the best reason I know for doing it. And that has been my mantra.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Joanne. You have given us some valuable insight. And up next, we're going to be talking about if you want to buy or sell a business, what you need to know. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast, and we'll be right back. Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, and I want to welcome you to Small Biz Lady University. Our mission here is to end small business failure. So all of the courses here are about two things: how to become your own boss or how to make money online. So that's what we do here. So whether you want to learn about email marketing and sales funnels, or you're ready to get started with social media selling, or if you're really just getting started with e-commerce, you might want to jump into our How to Sell and Market Online course. Either way, if you want to learn how to become your own boss and do it well, I have everything you need here at smallbizladyuniversity.com. If you have any questions or have any technical problems getting signed up, just email us at support@melindaemerson.com. Take care. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you're watching us on Facebook, share the link. We want other entrepreneurs to know how to get this great advice to take their small business to the next level. Now, let me introduce my next guest. His name is David Barnett. He loves to say that it took him 10 years to unlearn what he learned in business school. After a career in advertising sales, Barnett started several businesses, including a commercial debt brokerage house. Helping to finance small and medium-sized businesses led to the field of business brokerage. Over several years, Barnett sold dozens of businesses for others while also managing his own portfolio of income properties, and started him in a career as a local private investor. Barnett regularly consults with professionals and banks on business and asset values. Presently, he also works with entrepreneurs and would-be entrepreneurs around the world who are buying, selling, or trying to improve their businesses. You can get more information about him at davidcbarnett.com. David, welcome to the Small Biz Chat podcast.
Oh my goodness, I'm excited to be here. It's great to be here. This is an awesome show.
Well, I gave just the snippet of your story, but why don't you tell us your backstory, like what made you become so passionate about being a business broker and investor?
Well, Melinda, you forgot to use the F word there. So I'm a former business broker. And the reason that I got into business brokerage is because I was doing the commercial debt brokerage back before the great financial crisis. And during the GFC, a whole bunch of the companies that I was using as a source of financing went under because of the events on Wall Street and everything. And I realized during that time that I had been approached by a lot of people looking to get money to buy existing businesses, and they were very poorly served in the marketplace. And I realized there was an opportunity to become a business broker and to do things a little bit better. And so I joined up with one of the big franchise brands in the business brokerage industry because they gave me access to training. I did that for 3 years, and it was the most interesting thing I've ever done, because you're trying to figure out how to solve monumental problems and get two parties that may be very far apart to find a deal together that's also acceptable to a bunch of other people, accountants, attorneys, bankers, etc. And brokers get paid when the deals are done. And so even though I did, it was over 36 deals in 3 years, it sounds like a lot, but in each one of those years, there was a period of 7 to 9 months with no closings, which meant I lived through an incredibly wild cash flow roller coaster, as you might imagine, with no money coming in for long periods. I eventually left and became a banker. But while I was working for the bank, the phone kept ringing. It was people coming to me looking for help on these deals. Eventually, I got back into the world of helping people buy and sell businesses as a consultant. And so now I work with buyers and sellers. I have no financial interest in whether a deal is done. I borrowed the business model of attorneys and accountants. So I basically work with people, build them for what I do. And it's good because sometimes my advice to people is to not do a deal because it doesn't make sense. And there's a lot of those potential landmines out there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's just talk about buying a business first. So
sure.
What is the best place to find a business to buy?
The best place? Well, people often start with the easiest place, which is those websites that advertise businesses for sale. And they're easy because it's all in one place and you can look it up online. The problem is that you're competing with all the other buyers when you're looking at those websites. And the other thing is that 80% of deals happen without any kind of intermediary. So buyers and sellers find each other through different means. They come together and they do deals without the business ever being advertised for sale. And so the best way to find a business is to figure out what you want. Because if you know what kind of business it is you want to acquire, finding them is as easy as finding a copy of the Yellow Pages or whatever the modern online version of that is. Because if you decide, for example, I want a machine shop in upstate New York, you can find them. Then it's a matter of creating the relationships and meeting the people in that industry to find out who is open to an opportunity to exit, which is what essentially you're selling. You're selling an opportunity to exit. And a lot of the times there's a mismatch where you'll meet someone who doesn't want to sell, but then because you're active in that market, maybe a year later, that person does. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time.
Well, that was actually going to be my follow-up question. So what is the time frame like? Like, do you meet somebody and 6 months later they're leaving, they're waving goodbye with their big old check in their pocket? Or does it take, 1 to 2 years to build rapport so that someone would be willing to sell you their business?
It's a great question. And the fact is that it's different for every person, and it's different by the type and size of business that you might be looking at. So I work with a lot of different people that are looking at buying businesses. Some people find a business on one of those websites I mentioned, and 2 months later, they're getting the keys to the new business. Other people will spend years doing a search, talking with people, sometimes talking with the same people off and on over a period of time. Sometimes, and this may be surprising to some, but sometimes people get into the market and they believe their business is worth more than it really is. And so sometimes a buyer and seller will talk, but they can't come to terms. And that seller will believe that the business is worth more. They'll go out looking for someone else who's willing to pay more. And then a few months later, they'll talk again and still may not come to terms. I've got clients that I've worked with who've had on again, off again conversations for over a year with someone before they finally came to an agreement and actually did a deal. And then once you involve the banks, you can then add further to that timeline because of their process.
So is it about when those things go on with this back and forth business for a year, is that because the seller finally gets the realization of what their business is really worth? Or they finally went out and had a professional valuation done, and that's how they know what their business is worth. I mean, I know that it's always like some multiple of EBITDA, right? But I think that, I really think that I do think there's an issue out there. People think their business is worth more than it is. And then I think there's a group of people who don't think their business is worth very much when in fact it is. And so I think and you could tell me better than I could tell you, but have you seen a lot on both sides of this?
It's a question of compulsion and motivation, if you will. So, businesses sell for a multiple of cash flow, as you just said, but in the world of small businesses, that multiple is a pretty low multiple. It's a very low number. And so a lot of the times when I meet with business owners and we talk about selling, I'll show them what other businesses like theirs have sold for. And they almost all have the same response, Melinda. They say, if I just stayed here for a couple of years, I'd have the same money. And so it's difficult to get excited about that. And so the reason businesses go up for sale is not so someone can cash out like Mark Zuckerberg does when he sells his stock, right? The reason these small businesses go up for sale is because somebody reaches a point in their life when they realize they can no longer carry on being the operator. So this is a personal reason or retirement. And it's just a question of how big a reason, what does a timeline look like, and how motivated do they have to be? People who plan on retiring tend to be less motivated than someone who's been told by their doctor maybe that they're suffering from an illness. And so that motivation is one of the key things that's going to make someone act more quickly or not.
So how much money typically do you need to buy a business?
Well, most of your listeners are probably in the United States, and in the US, you've got the SBA guarantee program for loans. And so a good rule of thumb is that whatever the seller's discretionary earnings is going to be of a business you want to buy, and that is the money available to a full-time owner operator in the business. So this is the pay of that manager and the profit of the business, all that money that's available to a full-time owner operator. Let's say you want to go out and get a business that has a discretionary earnings of $100,000. You're going to need about half of that in liquid cash or equity. And with that amount of money, you can likely put together a deal if you're able to qualify for some SBA financing and get the seller to maybe finance a portion of it as well.
So you do an earn out with the seller? Is that how the seller finances it?
Well, an earn out relates to the future activity of the business. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of ways that you can pay a seller over time. Most often it's what we call a seller note, where it's a fixed amount that the buyer has to pay. So it's a debt instrument, but it's a debt instrument being financed or held by the seller. And it's really important for these small business deals because, when you buy a house, for example, or a car, you can have experts look at the house, look at the car, inspect it, tell you if there are any kind of problems. When it comes to a business, we've got so many moving parts and things that are really difficult to measure, like the reputation of the business in the community or how the clients and customers in the community feel about the owner of the business, for example. Because when you buy a business, that owner is usually departing and you're taking their role. And so there's so many of these unknowns that we need to rely on some kind of mechanism that basically holds the seller to account, to be accountable. And so these seller notes are usually subject to offset in the case of a material misrepresentation. So if there was a lie or an error or some kind of untrue thing that the seller told you, you have a mechanism for recourse against that note. But it also creates confidence. As a buyer, if you're going to buy a business and the seller says, you know what, you remind me of myself 20 years ago, and I really think you've got what it takes to make this work. And I believe in you, so I'm going to finance part of this for you. It gives the buyer confidence. It also gives the banker confidence because the banker understands that this seller knows the business better than anyone, and the seller's willing to finance part of it. It makes it easier for the banker to believe that the buyer's got what it takes as well.
Interesting. So if you decide that you're going to buy a business, who do you need on your team?
Well, it's usually a team effort, and at a minimum, you're going to need the help of an attorney and an accountant. And then there's a whole array of other kinds of specialists that you might have on your team. So if it's a highly, a business with a lot of technical equipment and things, you might want some kind of technician, qualified repair person, et cetera, that can help you look at that sort of thing. If it's an industry you're not that familiar with, you might want a coach or a consultant specific to that industry, someone who maybe used to run a business in that field, who can help you take a look at it. The way that I help people is by looking at the deals and helping to assess the business. I've looked at so many files over the years that I work through them very quickly, and I can show people where the potential problems are, what they need to investigate more, and give them an idea of what the value is. And that can save people a lot of time, especially when we're talking about one of those sellers who grossly overestimates the value of their business.
So I have had people say that sometimes you need a bedside banker. What is that?
A bedside banker? I don't know. I don't trust any of them to let them near my bed.
Yeah, someone told me that you need a bedside banker involved in one of those deals too, but I guess we'll skip over that. So, if you decide that you want to sell your business, what is the best way to let people know that you're interested in selling your business?
Well, the first thing you want to do is not let anyone know. Confidentiality is one of the critical elements in preserving the value of a business. If the main stakeholders, so think about your suppliers, your customers, your employees, your current bankers or other people lending you money, if they find out the business is for sale, they can make assumptions that there's something wrong with the business. Most people are not business people. Most people are happy working in a job. And for the average person that, watches football and movies, when they hear that a business is up for sale, it often means that there's something wrong with that business. And so we don't want people to know it's up for sale because we don't want people to worry about the future. All of your best employees always have job prospects with your competitors. And so if word gets out that a business is for sale, you could lose employees. Customers might worry that, your warranty offer isn't going to be very good because you're planning to close up shop. You could have bankers worried that there's something wrong with your business. Suppliers might decide to pull trade credit from you, and they might want to be paid cash on delivery for different products. So you want to keep it secret, and you need to come up with a plan. So you can either ask yourself, who is the most likely buyer of my business, and work to create a network to get you in front of those people. Or you can go to a professional like a business broker who's going to help show you what your business may be worth and can help to promote it in a confidential fashion.
So when positioning your business to sell, what do you think are the top 3 things that a seller, a business owner needs to keep in mind?
Yeah. So number 1, we already talked about, which is confidentiality. So you want to keep it a secret because if word gets out, the business can be ruined. Number 2 is cash flow. The value of a business is always determined by the cash flow. So the more cash flow there is, the better it is for the price, but also the consistency and regularity of the cash flow is key. When I see a business that has, performance that jumps and sinks by 30, 40% every year, it causes a little bit of uneasiness because you don't really know what the future is going to hold for a business like that. But if I see regular performance that's growing at an inflationary rate or maybe a little bit better, and it's an steady business that keeps going up every year, that gives me great confidence it's likely to continue, for example. The third thing is that every buyer who looks at that cash flow, they're going to say, wow, this is a great cash flow. They're then going to be faced with this question. Do I believe it will continue under my stewardship? And so that's a big question because, if I'm going to invest in Coca-Cola, if I buy the stock of that company, I get the benefit of all the leadership and management that's over there today. They're going to carry on if I become a shareholder. But when I buy a small business, the leader is often going to depart and I'm going to take their role, which means that I need to be certain that I'm going to be able to pick up and learn how to run this business just as effectively as the current owner. And this is where things like operations manuals and business systems and checklists and other management tools become so critical, because we're going to have to show this buyer that, yeah, I'm going to be able to teach you how to run this. Quick story. I sold a restaurant once. The buyer was worried that the employees might leave, and he had never run a restaurant before. And he said, well, how do I know these employees are going to stick around? And the seller looked at him and said, it's a restaurant. In a year, they're all going to be gone. And then explained the system he had developed for how to find great employees and determine whether they were motivated and responsible people very quickly. And he then described all the ads he was using online and his methodology. And he said, I'm going to teach you this whole system so that you're going to be able to use that system to replace these people as they turn over. And that system is what allowed the buyer to have confidence and move forward with the deal, even though those employees were likely going to turn over.
Now, what about the kind of deals where people ask the original owner to stay on for a year or two through a transition? Is that common?
It depends on the type of business. And so the more complex a business is, or the more tied the clientele is to that individual person, then the longer the transition period might be. So in some professional practices, for example, people are going to be asked to stay on longer than in a business like, a retail store, for example, where skills are going to transfer more readily. Also, it's important not to just think about these transitions as a period of time. A lot of buyers will believe that there's a lot of secrets in a business that they're going to take a long time to learn. They'll ask for, I want the seller for 3 months or 4 months, et cetera. And what I point out to people is that whenever they've had a new job in the past, they likely have, learned quite a bit and been very functional after a few weeks, but then they needed someone's guidance from time to time going forward to make sure they stayed on track. And so I often advise buyers to look at transition periods where there's a certain fixed period of time, like 6 or 8 weeks in the beginning, but then they have the right to have the seller come back maybe for 5 or 10 days in the following year, to come and follow up and to consult with them when certain events happen in the business that might require a little more guidance over the course of time.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Well, listen, we're going to take a break. And when we come right back, we're going to talk more about what you need to know before you try to sell your business. I'm Melinda Emerson, the Small Biz Lady. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast, and we will be right back. Are you ready to become a boss? Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady. Click the button below and take my free boss quiz. This assessment will help you learn your entrepreneur type and find the right business model for you. Get this information about the #1 asset in your business. Yeah, that's you. Welcome back. I'm talking with business consultant David Barnett, and he's talking to us about what you need to know before you buy or sell a business. All right, David, let's talk about business valuation. This is the big issue that people always seem to struggle with. What is my business worth, and what do I need to do? How do I figure it out? So how do you advise people on that?
Well, the whole key is to get back to a number called discretionary earnings, which is the amount of money that would have been available to an owner operator that worked full time if they had taken over your business at some point in the past. So that's the wages you paid yourself. If you wrote yourself a W-2, it's the profit of the business, and it's the things that you chose to spend money on that weren't actually part of the business's needs, like maybe your teenage daughter's cell phone. So we go through and we add up those things to find out what is that cash flow. And then depending on the type of business that you're in, we then multiply that number by a factor that we can find. And I have access to private databases of past transactions. So a bar or restaurant is going to have a lower multiplier than a machine shop because they would be considered a riskier business. So we multiply out the cash flow, and that gives us something called an enterprise value. And that enterprise value includes everything required to make the business's cash flow. And this is where people get hung up and a little bit confused, because part of what makes a business go is the operating capital. And depending on what kind of business you have, there's different considerations that go into what part of the operating capital needs to be included in that enterprise value. So one of the common mistakes that people make is they look at the cash and receivables and the payables, and they exclude that from this conversation. But if I need money to finance my customers' purchases through receivables, then that money required is just as important to making the business function as a forklift I'm using to load my truck. And that's the way you need to think about it. Operating capital is just like any other piece of equipment. You need to figure that out, or you'll end up either over or undervaluing the business.
So, what are some of the common mistakes people make when they're buying a business?
Well, there's a few. In fact, I wrote a book called 21 Stupid Things People Do When Trying to Buy a Business, because I kept running into the same ones over and over again. And so here are some top ones. The biggest one is failing to understand the value of your own labor. So when I talk about discretionary earnings, that's the money available to a full-time owner operator, which means you got to work full-time to get that money. So when you're looking at that cash flow, don't think of it all as profit. Part of it has to be taken aside to actually represent the work you're doing. And that money's got to come home to, feed your family and pay your bills and all that kind of stuff. People consistently undervalue themselves in this. The other one is the value of capital. So if you put in some cash into this highly risky venture, which is a small business, you need to earn a rate of return on the cash you put in. People often forget about that. They'll put a down payment in and they'll never think about the rate of return on their own money, which should be far greater than the rate of interest you pay the bank, because the bank is in a less risky position than you are. Another one would be overcommitting cash flow. So I'll see people use that discretionary earnings. They'll undervalue their labor, then they'll commit too big a portion of the cash flow to their debt service payments, and they'll end up with what we call tight shoes. So all of a sudden, they don't have a lot of wiggle room. And if some minor problem happens in the business, suddenly they're in a position where they have trouble making a bank loan payment, or they have to cut one of their own paychecks, for example. And so people will paint themselves into a corner sometimes because they are a little bit too optimistic. They think that they're going to improve the business right away. I always say to people, if you're buying a successful business from someone who's been running it for a very long time, there is no doubt that person you're buying it from is the expert. And so we should not assume that we're going to do better than that person immediately. We may bring improvements to the business, but we should give ourselves time. And for the first couple of years, you should just assume that you're going to do exactly the way the seller has done, because you're going to learn from that person. And I don't recommend rocking the boat in a business until you fully understand why things are done the way they are. Because if there's a system in there, there's probably a reason why it was put there.
I love it. I love it. All right. Last question. What is the best business advice you've ever been given?
Okay. So often when things fail, we do a postmortem. And I was once advised, do a postmortem in advance. So if you are getting into any kind of business activity, just ask yourself, if this doesn't work, what will likely have been the cause? And then you can consider some of the likely problems that may arise and maybe change your plan a little bit to address those things and try to give yourself a more resilient position.
I love it. I love it. David, thank you so much. Your insight has been really refreshing and interesting. And I feel like I learned some stuff. Maybe one day I can sell my business. Who knows? But listen, when we come back, we're going to be talking to a business owner who is going to teach all of us how to scale a service business. You're watching the SmallBizChat podcast. Stay with us. Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, and I want to welcome you to Small Biz Lady University. Our mission here is to end small business failure. So all of the courses here are about two things: how to become your own boss, or how to make money online. So that's what we do here. So whether you want to learn about email marketing and sales funnels, or you're ready to get started with social media selling, or if you're really just getting started with e-commerce, you might want to jump into our How to Sell and Market Online course. Either way, if you want to learn how to become your own boss and do it well, I have everything you need here at smallbizladyuniversity.com. If you have any questions or have any technical problems getting signed up, just email us at support@melindaemerson.com. Take care. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host, and I'm so excited to be talking to my next guest, Chef Eboni Bowman. And she's going to talk to us about how she scaled her solo business into a full service catering service. And she is the founder of Flavor Atlanta, and she turned her lifelong love of cooking into a successful Georgia-based small business offering personal chef services, meal prep, cooking classes, and catering. Both of Eboni's grandmothers did a lot of cooking and baking, and one was a professional caterer. Eboni started helping them in the kitchen from when she was just 5 years old. Then she went and studied at the Art Institute of Atlanta's Culinary School and now she has more than 20 years of experience in the culinary and hospitality industries. And if you want more information about her business, it is flavoratlanta.com. Eboni, welcome to the Small Biz Chat podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So talk to us. How did Flavor Atlanta come about?
Flavor Atlanta came about as kind of a side hustle. I've always loved cooking, loved baking, being in the kitchen, of course, test tasting with my grandparents. But I've worked in the food industry for quite some time, started catering on the side, but it wasn't until I had left my full-time employment that I went full force with Flavor Atlanta.
So how long did you run it as a side hustle before it became your main gig?
It was about 2 years. It's not an easy thing, I might add, especially working in food service industry. I was working in a kitchen, managing a kitchen for a senior home, and I managed the kitchen staff and dining room staff. So having that big responsibility, which things are always going on, it's like I'm on call 24 hours a day. And then on the weekends or after work, I'm catering, small parties or doing cooking classes, that kind of thing.
All right. So how have you funded your business?
I started small. I didn't take out any loans. I just started booking small gigs. I had a lot of referrals. A lot of my friends know that I cook, know that I had started a business. So they were referring people to me. And so I just started small. I didn't want to start off in a lot of debt. I didn't want to buy a big building. I rented space in a commercial kitchen, which I still do. And it makes it a lot easier. It makes it more affordable. I'm not taking in a whole lot of overhead. And I just take my time. I took my time and built the business kind of like a brick by brick.
I think most of us have done that. So
Yeah.
What would you say was your tipping point that made you realize you needed to do something to grow?
I was not happy at my full-time job. And so when we decided to part ways, I said, I'm not gonna, go full-time anywhere else. I'm just gonna dedicate my time to doing this full-time and make it really work for me. And I cannot say that it couldn't have happened at a better time. It was in November. I was thinking to myself, like, gosh, the holidays are coming up. How am I gonna balance this? Because holidays are always busy for me. From like how I was growing, so I was a lot busier than I was the year before. I'm like, how am I gonna balance this and go to work and manage my staff at the same time? But I think everything happens for a reason. So when we decided to part ways, I went all in with Flavor Atlanta.
So what did you have to do to scale? Like when you went all in, did you have to get a team? Did you have to get a virtual assistant? Like, how did you handle it?
So I do still have some people that help me, but at that time I wasn't really scaling. I was kind of making everything work because things were really coming at me fast. Like the business was like building quicker than I was prepared for it to. So I didn't start scaling until probably a year or so in, when someone was like, look, you're going to burn yourself out if you're doing things the way that you're doing them. So it wasn't until we sat down and had that conversation that I really sat there and thought about it. I'm like, you know what, you're right. So they started helping me put together a system where I was able to scale the business. For things like the meal prep services, I was doing a huge long menu because I'm thinking about my customers. I'm like, my customers want to eat something different every day. And they were like, no, they just really don't want to cook. So instead of making, a menu that was like 7 different meals, they're like, no, do 4 or 5. And then we'll take the same ingredients and do the same thing. So while I'm not holding on to the ingredients from week to week, but I have a similar shopping list. where if I have leftover oats or flour or whatever ingredient I might have left over, I'm just buying the same thing the next week versus having to buy a whole new set of ingredients. Wasting, you know, it keeps me from wasting stuff. It keeps me from having all this overage, running out of space, storing all these extra different ingredients. So that was the first thing. So it wasn't that I noticed that it was a need for it. Someone else said, look, you're not doing this the right way. Let me help you. So that's how I started my scaling process.
Now, did you outsource parts of it too, or did you just kind of just organize your time and better?
A little bit of both. I love a system or a company that I use. It's called Rody Incorporated. They are an Atlanta-based delivery service, and they're owned by UPS. It's almost like a DoorDash or Uber Eats, where they pick up for me, they do my deliveries. So that kept me inside the kitchen instead of me doing my own deliveries, which I was doing and running myself crazy because I can't be two places at the same time. So I outsourced that. I outsourced somebody to help me with my emails and email blasts and social media, writing out some of the verbiage for my weekly emails, doing my graphic designs for my not necessarily flyers, but when I put out a menu every week, of course, when you get the food, you want everyone to see a certain thing. People are more attracted to stuff that has a picture of a nice, pretty plate versus just, hey, order this meal and it's all words. So I have somebody that does that graphic design for me. I bring in people that help me in the kitchen. So having somebody who has the time and the expertise to do something else that frees me up to do what I do best, which is being in the kitchen.
So how important has your marketing and your networking been to like keeping things going? Like, do you feel like you have a loyal following on social media or on your email list? Like, are people waiting to see what the menu is?
I do. And you know, we usually put our menus out on Thursday. Around the holidays, it kind of gets crazy and it might be on Friday, but I'm getting text messages and calls like, hey, I'm looking for your menu. Are y'all not cooking this week? I need my meals. Or the week of holidays when I might not do a regular meal prep menu, it's like holiday food, or we'll do a lot of baking. They're like, so you mean my kids are home and my family's home and I can't order meals? So that does make me feel good that people appreciate my service. And a lot of them have told me that the service that I provide to them makes it easier for their family.
Love it. Love it. So do you specialize in any particular kind of meals? Like, do you do organic or Southern fried? What, like, you know, how are you, do you kind of give people what the flavor, you know, what you, how
so
you,
I pride myself on doing everything from scratch. So while I might not, I don't have like a specialty, but from my salad dressings, from the seasoning blends, I do shop in the farmer's market, all fresh vegetables, no frozen, no canned foods. Those are the things that I pride myself on because I know a lot of other caterers or people in the food industry take the quickest way out. Food cost is crazy right now. I can't even tell you, I would say like a rack of lamb used to be $8.99 a pound. Now it's $15 a pound. It's almost doubled in the last year and a half. But I mean, even though some of those costs are passed over to the customer, just having that fresh food is super important. Not cooking everything with those preservatives and those processed foods is super important to me. And I make sure that my customers know that. And when they're asking, well, why is this price? I can get it such and such place for somewhere cheaper. Again, I mean, that may be what you have to do, but if you want food that's fresh, you want it to be flavorful, which is why I'm Flavor Atlanta. Fresh food and flavorful food, that's what I do.
Well, listen, what would you say is the best business advice that you've ever gotten?
Best outsourcing. You know, when I'm in, like I said earlier, when I'm in the thick of it and I'm just on go mode, I go. I work, I get all of my clients taken care of. I didn't think about how getting others involved to help me run the business or let them focus on what they can do to help me was so much more beneficial. Now, I'm not saying I'm not a tired person. I'm not saying that there are times where I don't get a lot of rest, but just having those people in place that can do those things and let them do what they're good at and let me do what I can do and what I'm good at, it makes it so much more peaceful, better for me. I'm a happier person. I'm not a little Grinch. Which, you know, when you're really busy, you don't realize how you come off to other people. And
I
so
completely know.
I had to take my life back. So outsourcing.
Love it, love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. You really have given us a lot of helpful advice. I think it is very hard for service businesses to scale. So I'm really excited to hear the things that you've been able to do to scale because basically you have a personal chef business, and that is a lot, and you're working with very specific people. So I love it. I love the advice that you gave. And what I want to do now is invite our other two guests back. And so that we can all have a quick panel that I love to call Hit It or Quit It. Now, let me tell you guys how this works. I'm going to invite back my guests, Joanne Black and David Barnett, and obviously, Eboni, we're still talking with you. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask a question. Each of you are going to be asked the exact same question, and you're only going to have 30 seconds to answer, and you cannot repeat somebody else's answer. So if somebody steals your answer, you're stuck like Chuck. You better come up with something else, or you're going to get the cowbell, and I don't want to give you the cowbell. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to start with you, Joanne, first. I'm then going to go to David, and then you, Eboni, and then we'll switch it up. Next question. All right. Very first question we're going to have is, what is your favorite podcast? Joanne, what is your favorite podcast?
Paul Watts, the Sales Reinvented podcast. He takes a different take on things. He has a theme, and a lot of people just speak on that specific theme. And he does it free. He has a whole business. He's employed, and this is separate. He's fabulous.
Love it. David, what's your favorite podcast?
I really enjoy a podcast called The How of Business, hosted by Henry Lopez. He talks to a lot of different small business people about operational stuff and about their story about how they manage to do things. Lots of great, useful information for small business people. All
right, Eboni, what is your favorite podcast?
It's called Therapy for Black Girls, and it is by it's a hellodrjoy.com, excuse me. And it just really pushes mental health for Black women and young girls.
Oh, I've never heard of that one. I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds really interesting. All right. Question 2, David, I'm coming to you first, then you, Eboni, then you, Joanne. What is your favorite business app? Business app?
Well, I don't know. It's probably the calculator app. That's how I add up how much money I'm making, right?
The calculator app on your phone. I love it. All right. Eboni, what is your favorite app?
I make Roadie. That's what I do to send my deliveries out. That's needed all the time. It makes my life work.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. Joanne, what's your favorite app?
I'm my favorite app, because our best app is ourselves, right? To get business, to build relationships, and be with people.
You did say that. Okay. You did say that earlier. All right. Next question. Eboni, this one's coming to you first, then you, Joanne, then you, David. What is your favorite old school marketing tip? Favorite old school marketing tip?
Let's see, maybe networking, or like I get a lot of business referrals. I think that's something that's going to be around forever.
I agree. I agree. I think there's others on this call that would say the same. Joanne, what's your favorite old school marketing tip?
Sending notes, handwritten. I've had people say to me, I mean, this is years ago and still, where did you get your stationery? I love it. So I have a note cards with my business on there, and I write a handwritten note, whatever, if I send somebody something or just to say thank you, definitely if I receive a referral or even happy birthday, happy holidays, whatever it is. They are so appreciative. You know, as human beings, what we want is thank you.
Exactly. All right, David, what's your favorite old school marketing tip?
If your business serves a certain community or neighborhood or part of a city, advertise with door hangers. I've had so many business clients of mine have huge success with door hangers. Nobody's doing them anymore. And you got to handle it. You got to hold it. And the message gets across.
Interesting. Interesting. That sounds like a great idea for a local business, Eboni. That sounds like a really great idea. All right. Last question. David, I'm going to ask you first, then you, Joanne, then you, Eboni. What is the best business book you have ever read?
Oh, it's a marketing and communications book. It's called Persuasion Secrets of the World's Most Charismatic and Influential Villains. And the guy who wrote it basically looks at, you know, all the great stories that we've ever had and how the villain is so important and what the keys are to the villain's communication and how we can use that in business.
Now that I have to say, that's the first time I've heard about that book, but it sounds like a good read. All right, Joanne, what's your favorite business book?
It's called The Startup of You, and it was written by Reid Hoffman, who was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. It is perfect for small business owners. And here's what he says: adapt to the future, invest in yourself, and transform your career. He talks about the importance of conversations and not just connections.
I love it. The founder of LinkedIn talking about the importance of conversations. Good advice. All right, Eboni, what is your favorite business book?
I would say it is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Definitely made me rethink some things. I don't have a lot of time for reading, but to me, the way that book was broken down, I can read it piece by piece and come back to it, pick it back up when I have more time. So it's perfect.
I love that. I love that. That old school book, but it's one everybody's got on their shelf. And my favorite business book actually is a book called Disrupt You by Jay Salmon. And I love this book because he says, if you want to change the world, start by disrupting yourself. So I love it. And I bought that book and given it to many, many people because I think it's important. I have really appreciated all three of you very much. Thank you so much to my guest sales expert, Joanne Black. Check out her website, nomorecoldcalling.com. Thank you to David Barnett. If you're looking to buy or sell a business, look him up at davidcbarnett.com. And thank you so much to Chef Eboni Bowman, founder of Flavor Atlanta. Her website is flavораtlanta.com. Now listen, if you're interested in starting your dream business in 2023, I want to encourage you to check out my new course, Become Your Own Boss. It is a 10-week online course that is going to give you everything you need to launch your dream business. It starts January 31st. I'm doing it in partnership with Drexel University, so I can also get you some CEU credits if that's something that you need. I'm going to help you build a business plan and a sales plan so that you're going to be able to drive sales on day one of your business. If you're interested in checking out the course, head over to our URL, tinyurl.com/BYOB Drexel. Now, thank you so much for joining us tonight on this episode of the Small Biz Chat podcast. The mission of the Small Biz Chat podcast is to end small business failure. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host, and I will leave you with this. You never lose in business. Either you win or you learn. God bless everybody.